The soothing murmur of classical music played in the backdrop of the dimly lighted restaurant, with its warm warmth radiating. Barbara adjusted her wine glass as the romantic atmosphere persisted throughout the evening, her manicured nails tapping quietly as she leaned forward, her attention riveted on Jake across the table. Jake's confident. His dark hair was nicely combed, and his tailored suit projected an air of. Jake possessed the charisma of a man who was used to being in command as the head of the marketing department, could command both a boardroom and Barbara's heart. Tonight they celebrated a milestone, a hidden anniversary marking. 6 months ago their affair began. Barbara's every glance and touch, shared across the mahogany table, had the thrill of forbidden pleasure, and her eyes glinted with. She sipped her wine, savoring not only its rich flavor, but also the intoxicating. In the company of Jake, their passion had grown among the routine of office life. Barbara, formerly diligent and reserved, she found herself lured to Jake's magnetic personality during late-night meetings and shared projects. He was the reverse. David, her spouse, is spontaneous, bold, and has a flair for making her feel uninvited. The name David came to her mind. She tried to push it away when Jake's palm brushed against hers, but her thoughts betrayed her while Jake leaned forward, telling her a story from work with his signature charm. Barbara's mind strayed to the life she'd left behind. For this ephemeral romance, David, her husband of 5 years, was everything. Jake was not stable, loyal, and unwavering in his support. David constructed their lives. Brick by brick, he sacrificed his wants to secure their future. The guy who had stood with her through thick and thin, who loved her with a quiet, steady devotion, but in Jake's, Barbara experienced something she hadn't felt in years, a spark, an electrifying passion that raced through her veins. With Jake, there were no rituals or expectations, only the excitement of stolen moments, where David represented security. In comfort, Jake was fire and adrenaline, a sharp contrast that Barbara discovered. With each passing day, she touched the rim of her glass with her finger, staring at Jake. Because he was everything forbidden and adventurous, and the secret of their relationship only added to its fascination. As Jake's deep voice filled the air, Barbara reflected on the double life she was leading. David's stability and Jake's frantic joy seemed to her like the ideal equilibrium. Barbara, Jake said, pulling her back to the present on where his palm rested. He lightly touched hers, sending a thrill through her. What are you thinking about? Barbara smiled, tilting her head, thinking how fortunate she is to be here with you tonight. Jake was extremely thrilled as he raised his glass to 6 unforgettable months. He toasted to 6 months. Barbara's voice resonated steadily, trough inside. Her thoughts waged a quiet fight. She was breaking every rule she previously believed in, but her heart beat with determination. After all, there was only one life to live, and she wanted everything to be according to the rules. And morality be damned. Jake leaned across the table, his warm fingers wrapping around Barbara's fingers. His black eyes gleamed with mischief as he quietly inquired, "Are you thinking too much again?" "Barbara, maybe you're worried about your spouse, David. How is he doing?" Barbara let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "Yes, everything is well with my hubby. Like any other husband, he's been a little concerned lately, but I don't think he knows anything he doesn't supposed to know about my pastimes." Her lips twisted into a flirtatious smirk. Jake lifted an eyebrow, curious and worried. "Why is that, Barbara?" He paused for a bit before answering, swirling the wine in her glass. "I believe Hune has been on edge because he went to visit his parents on their ranch a couple of days ago. He hasn't seen them in a long time, and he's especially. Jake is concerned about his father, who is getting older, and David has been feeling guilty for not visiting him more frequently." Back, his grin widening. "A ranch. David is from the country I never pegged." Barbara giggled, a tiny blush developing across her cheeks. Trust me, he's not a cowboy. David's too peaceful and nice. His disposition doesn't really match the cowboy's spirit. Jake smirked, turning teasing a real man should sincerely adore a lady and take risks. Be adventurous, not some gray worm. His words floated in the air packed with a wicked grin. He moved closer and continued. Now I'm a real man, and after supper we're going to have a race. A true love race, Barbarous. Her cheeks reddened deeper as she chuckled at his bravado. She cocked her head flirtatiously, her voice softening into light-hearted challenge. Well, a love race. And what precisely does it involve? Jake leaned in his lips, just a whisper away from hers. Let's just say it's not for. Barbara was about to answer with a seductive comeback prepared on her lips. When their talk was interrupted, the waiter appeared with two desserts, both covered with a polished silver lid, and set them on the table. Forgive me, Barbara replied, knitting her brows together. Surprised that we did not order dessert, the waiter smiled sweetly with his hands. Barbara moved her glance to Jake, clasped behind his back. It's a gift. Gleaming with suspicion and delight. Honey, perhaps you arranged this surprise. Jake leaned back with a smug smile. Oh, I'm a master of surprises, but come on, ordering dessert, that's way too small. For my scale, the waiter chuckled graciously and went away, leaving the two of them looking at the intriguing. Barbara chuckled at the confections in front of them, her earlier stress melting away. Present, huh? Perhaps the cosmos is sending us a sign, a little cosmic approbation of Jake R.A. is his wine glass with a confident grin to the signs. They clinked glasses, their laughter melting into the quiet hum of the restaurant at the moment. Seemed strange perfect, as if their hidden romance was not only accepted but somehow blessed. The atmosphere at the table changed abruptly as Jake went for the lid of his dessert and lifted it with a flourish. It will show an elegant slice of chocolate cake topped with glossy frosting sticking out of the center like a. Jake inclined his head, as if in response to the Joker playing card. Lips curled into a half smile, he said, plucking the card from the cake. I don't get what type of foolish joke is this Barbara sitting for. Across from him felt a pang of disquiet at the sight of the card, and her fingers pounded nervously against the table. She reached for her own dessert and gingerly removed the top, revealing a similar piece of cake, but this one had a gleam of metal and a cherry impaled. Barbara's breath hitched as she sat perched on a ring atop the desert for a time. Her mind rushed to a romantic conclusion. Jake, she added with a hesitant laugh, holding the cake closer. I have a ring. Are you truly waiting for a voice? Her heart sank, and her eyes widened with dread. Jake, this is David's wedding ring. Panic flooded through her chest. Barbara's hands trembled as her imagination raced her husband's ring here in this restaurant. How her thoughts spun like a hurricane, each option more horrifying than the previous. She looked at Jake, but he seemed more annoyed than terrified. They sat in an awkward silence, each processing the strange sequence of events, when a shadow fell over the table. A man impeccable, clad in a nice suit, approached them and took a seat without being invited. Emanated authority, and his sharp, steady stare had a sense of military precision. Barbara and Jake exchanged puzzled glances, but neither spoke. I beg your apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Man began, his voice calm and measured. I won't take up much of your time. Jake, the brash one, leaned forward, his controlled demeanor starkly contrasted with the mayhem erupting at their table. His expression hardened. What the hell is going on? Who are you? And what sort of twisted joke are you searching for? Trouble. The man remained unflustered. My name is William, he said, his tone firm, and I would beg you to remain cool, since there is no cause for animosity from. Before Barbara opened this, William took a thin leather folder from his jacket and handed it to her. Jake's hand made a subtle move towards the Joker card. which he was still clutching. Understand you're a man who appreciates a good gamble. Jake narrowed his eyes, distrust engraved onto his face. Your game, and how do you know anything about me? William grinned weakly. My client, the corners of his lips barely curling, has a simple request, a bet. $50,000 if you're prepared to make the wager. You can walk away tonight with. No further. Jake roared into laughter, the sound booming out loudly enough to attract a few interested people from nearby. Tables, are you serious? Perhaps you also want me to undress on the table and dance in front of the audience, which is ridiculous. Who's pulling the strings here, David? He's your client. William didn't smile. He nodded once, confirming Jake's suspicion. Barbara's fingers fumbled as she opened the package William had handed her, and her gasp was audible as her eyes rested on the contents. Divorce papers. Signed and ready to file. No, this can't be happening, she muttered. Jake peered at the papers, his smile becoming smug. He sat back in his chair, dismissively gesticulating at Barbara, and he said, voice oozing with arrogance, it appears that your little David has decided to play tough. So what's the big deal? Barbara's voice faltered as she tried to explain herself. Her mind was still. Jake, you don't understand, David, and I have so many unresolved financial issues. And now he's filed for divorce out of nowhere. I don't even know what's going to happen. Jake shrugged, putting on his best display of assurance. Barbara relaxed, and we'll find. Good lawyer. Your David will crawl on his knees before this is over. He waved dismissively at William. And as for this wrecked evening, I'll personally deal with him and show him where his place is before you find out what happens next. Please subscribe to the channel so you're refusing my offer. William inquired again, his tone quiet and almost weary. Of course I'm refusing, Jake screamed. His voice rose enough to grab the notice of adjacent diners. Why should some hillbilly dictate conditions to me? Go to hell, and you mister get out of here too, or I'll get the staff to toss you out of the restaurant. William sighed. I'm sorry. There's no need to make noise, he added in a measured tone. Tone standing gracefully, I'm leaving. Barbara has a surprise waiting for her at home. Farewell, and have a wonderful evening. He went away, his shiny shoes clicking softly on the restaurant's hardwood floor. Barbara glanced after him. Her breathing was shallow, and her heart was hammering. The word surprise repeated in her mind, filling her with dread. She turned. Jake's voice was cracking, and he indicated there was a surprise for me. I need to go home right now, because I'm terrified. Jake leaned back with a languid. Calm down, he whispered, grabbing for her hand. His grin was as unwavering as ever. I'll go with you, don't worry. I'll solve everything. After all, I'm a real man who won't let some foolishness ruin our relationship. Barbara didn't respond. Jake's head racing with panic and anxiety. He indicated for the server to pay the bill with a flourish before helping Barbara into her coat. Let's go, he remarked, his voice breezing. The journey to Barbara's home was strained. Jake hummed along to the radio, the embodiment of serenity, while Barbara looked out the window, her thoughts a wild swirl. She couldn't shake the idea that her life was unraveling by the second. What if David was waiting for her at home? Jake chuckled and flashed a toothy grin. Better, he responded with a snort. I'll talk to him and give him a proper dressing down. Barbara gulped hard, a tear trickling down her cheek. Perhaps we shouldn't go. This has gone too far. I didn't want Jake to interrupt her. His tone was cheery, dismissive. Oh, come on. If David's already ready to file for divorce and has the documents prepared, what's the difference? Let him face the consequences. I'll teach him a lesson. Despite his bravado, Barbara couldn't shake the pit of fear that had formed in her stomach as they turned onto her street. Her heart fell. The lights in her house were gleaming hauntingly through the windows, like an invitation she craved. Jake parked the car with a dramatic flourish, and Leighton, get this. Done with, he replied firmly, moving out. Barbara unwillingly followed, her feet dragging as if the weight. Her dread physically constrained her whatever awaited them inside. She knew it wouldn't be nice Barbara and Jake. Barbara strode into the house, tension thick in the air, and switched the light switch, exposing a peaceful, empty home. Her eyes darted around nervously, almost expecting David to emerge from the shadows, but he was nowhere to be seen. Jake chuckled as he walked into the living area, looking around with his customary confidence. As I informed you that coward went away and you were anxious about nothing, he smirked and leaned on the kitchen counter. He probably ran back to his mommy and daddy on his small. Barbara disregarded Jake's taunt and looked around the room, feeling something. Her gaze landed on the kitchen table, where a sleek black folder stood. As she approached it, a shudder raced down her spine. She flicked it open and startled to find a handwritten letter. David, I know everything about your double life, and I have all of the. Divorce is the only way to atone for your misdeeds, but you will receive 3 months' worth of evidence. Nothing but the consequences. And by the way, look in this folder for information about your impudent boyfriend. Barbara's heart raced as she flipped to the next batch of documents, images, and printouts, leaving her speechless. The photographs showed Jake with other women, one dining closely at a restaurant and the other meeting him in a hotel lobby. More photos showed him laughing and leaning close to a third woman at what looked to be a pub. Barbara's eyes welled up with tears as she held out the evidence to Jake. Jake, are you seeing other women? Jake's expression tightened then softened. A defiant smirk. This is a terrible fake. He came closer and pointed. Look at one of the photographs. That woman is fully doctored. I worked with a former client, a contractor, and he jabbed at another. Photo, his voice speeding up. That's a friend FR. OM college. Certainly I was polite and nice, but these are merely photographs of discussions. They're attempting to build something out of nothing. Her tears slowed as she took in his explanation. So you're. Jake placed his hands on her shoulders and locked eyes with her, explaining that these are just misunderstandings. Absolutely, these photographs are supposed to upset us. It's all part of David's twisted little game. Look attentively. Do you see me? Kissing anyone, it shows in the photo, but look closely, it's plainly done by a good designer. It's all phony, Barbara. You can't allow him get into your brain. Barbara hesitated but acknowledged Jake's encouraging tone, which eased her fears. However, his mind was racing, concocting reason after explanation for explain away the damaging images. He couldn't let Barbara doubt him now, not when they were under attack from her husband's manipulative plans. Barbara returned to the folder, her blood flowing cold as she read another note. Tell Jake that he can make a $100,000 charitable contribution to my. Jake's face was twisted with wrath as he read the account. It would clear his mind and allow him to breathe better. Seized the papers and began tearing them to tears. This is absurd, he yelled. $101,000. Does he believe this is some kind of mob operation? Paper tumbled to the ground as he tore at the folder's contents with a frenzy. I will. Jake growled. I'm going to hire the best damn lawyer in the city, and we're going to rip David. Pieces in court. Just like I'm ripping these papers apart. This bullshit stops now. Barbara observed him with her emotions. Jake's blazing determination and confidence moment calmed her fears, and she clung to it. Jake threw the shredded remains into the trash. He glanced at Barbara and said firmly, We're not going to let him triumph. Believe me, Barbara. Barbara nodded, softly wiping away her tears. Jake's boldness was infectious, giving her a shred of faith that they might weather the storm together. The tension had lifted. Jake poured 2 glasses of whiskey and pushed one across the table to Barbara to help her relax. Barbara sipped the glass hesitantly, her mind motionless. Reeling from the events of the evening, Jake drew closer, his gaze fierce. Barbara, let's quit allowing David dominate our lives. This is your house now, without David. Let's make love in that bedroom. Barbara, This is the one he most likely sulked in for months. Blinked at him. Taken aback, Jake, I don't know how this feels. Jake's lips curled into a confident grin. Victory. It's us showing David that he no longer owns you. Trust me, Barbara. You'll thank me for this. Jake's tone and unyielding charisma gradually weakened her resistance, and she eventually yielded. Jake took her into his arms, and they disappeared into the master bedroom in the morning. Jake dressed sharply for work, adjusting his tie as he spoke. Don't worry about a thing, darling. LL cover for you at the office. I tell them you're unwell, take a couple of days off, and I focus on getting a lawyer. I'll start plan together to take your bastard husband down. Barbara nodded, still sleepy, but somewhat encouraged by his assurance. Jake kissed her cheek and left for the day, leaving her alone in the house. The hush sank. Barbara glanced out the window, her coffee turning cold in her hands. Perhaps this is for the best, she mumbled to herself. To hell with David, I'll have a different life now. Her phone buzzed, taking her out of her thoughts. She viewed the notice, which was an alert from her bank about your account. As frozen panic set in as she tried to log into her banking app. Barbara's heart raced as she realized that the shared savings account had been drained, which heightened her anxieties. What had happened was David had shifted all of the money into other accounts she couldn't access. She tried contacting, but the line went to voicemail. Her worry mounted with every passing second until eventually her phone rang. It was David. Barbara responded with a mix of wrath and desperation. David, what did you do? Do you froze my account and took our money? You're a coward. You made a show of handing over documents yesterday. We need to talk about all of this, or I'll be very upset. David's voice was calm, but had an evident edge of disappointed. Barbara, you made your choice. You'll have your reasons in court. Till then, I'm done discussing anything with you. You can't just. Barbara. David interrupted, his voice firm. I'm not. I'm no longer interested in listening to you. And you didn't even bother to call me last night to address all of your questions. Barbara trembled with fury as the queue went dead. Fearful and desperate for assistance, she contacted Jake, who answered after a few rings. Barbara complained to Jake in an uncharacteristically dry tone about David freezing the bank account and withdrawing all of the money. Jake quietly responded, Barbara, we've got a problem. What now? Her voice breaking. David is a cunning bastard, Jake stated. He informed our large company. Barbara shrieked. What did you tell your bosses about the affair? Jake exhaled heavily. As I told them that there was a mistake. Your husband is going insane because of the divorce. I claim he is paranoid and trying to ruin both of us out of vengeance. Did they believe you? The boss is ready to allow me some leeway. I'm a great addition to the firm. He's turning a blind eye for now, but I need to clear this up soon. Barbara grabbed her phone, her voice quivering. What can we do? Jake's voice became sharper, commanding. I'm looking for a lawyer. I'll involve some influential people to make sure we win this thing. But Barbara, I need David's number. I have to talk to him, man. She hesitated, unsure if handing him the number was the correct move. Jake's assurance and firm tone calmed her once more. Okay, c'est défendu. Above a whisper, she recounted David's phone number, and Jake scribbled it down. Don't worry, Jake replied, his tone softening. Barbara hung up, her nerves raw, clinging to the hope that Jake would keep his promises. Jake walked the floor of his office, phone close to his ear, hand clenched into a fist, as the cue. When Jake heard David's voice, he launched into his TI raid. Listen, you little punk, Jake hissed. You've begun a hazardous game, and you don't even know what you've gotten. You've crossed all the lines, and this is now personal to me. Jake was enraged at David's silence on the other end, said, his voice oozing with hatred, but I'm giving you a chance. David divorced Barbara routinely without any of your little tricks or plans, and explain why the hell you're running around talking to my management about me. Barbara, you should repair this, apologize, and accept that everything is a misunderstanding. Do that, and I will forget." Jake let the warning hang in the air, his tone ominous. A faint sound of David chuckling came across the phone. "I bet," David said, a calm certainty that made Jake's fury boil. "That's all. I offered you a bet. In the form of a charitable contribution. Consider compensating me for the damage you helped inflict. Marriage Barbara will carry full responsibility for her actions, as will you. But Jake, your arrogance and—" Jake gritted his teeth, hardly able to contain his wrath. "You think you're clever, right?" David disregarded him and pressed on his voice, calm but forceful. "Here's my last offer. Jake, make a $200,000 generous contribution to my account, and I'll safeguard your nerves. Be cool, and your conscience gets a little clearer." Jake corrupted, his voice booming. "You think I'm going to roll over and hand you that kind of money? Who the hell do you think you are? I'll smash you like a bug, you hear me? I have pals, true friends, powerful ones. I'll bring in the best damn lawyer money can buy, and you'll regret ever trying to mess with them." David remained unshaken, his tone as controlled as usual. "You're welcome to try. Jake, mark my words, you'll suffer for every step you've taken. The bets are—" David's voice went chilly as he finished saying, "Farewell, Jake. I have nothing else to say to you." The call was disconnected before Jake could hurl another insult. The phone onto his desk, mumbling curses beneath his breath. "That smug little bastard," Jake hissed. "He thinks he can toy with me," yet deep down a small voice nagged at him, which he refused to admit for the first time in a long. Jake felt the unpleasant prick of uncertainty on the first day of the divorce. The trial unfolded in a storm of revelations. David and his lawyer presented a pile of evidence, photographs, texts, and detailed details of Barbara's covert rendezvous with Jake. Each piece painted a vivid picture. Barbara's lawyer is a sharp-tongued man with a talent for stalling. Argued against the early admission of evidence, "Your Honor," he added effortlessly, "we cannot allow these assets to be used until their authenticity has been established." It was a smart idea to buy time for Barbara and Jake. Jake smirked as he sat in the gallery, softly complimenting the lawyer's plan. Time was exactly what he needed. Time to pressure David to use his connections and resources to make this whole ordeal. When the hearing ended, the judge adjourned the case until the next session. Barbara appeared visibly shaken, but Jake soothed her with his typical swagger. "Don't worry, baby, we got this. Just give me a few more days, and I'll make David glad he hadn't messed with us." While Jake was closing up his calls to pals who might aid him, corner David's phone buzzed, and the name on the screen made his stomach drop. "Jake, the boss, remarked curtly, I need you in my office immediately." And the queue went dead before Jake might react that the tone of the call indicated trouble, and this time it might be something he could not charm his way out of. Jake entered the boss's office, his confidence weakened, but not completely gone. The boss, a keen man who rarely minced words, motioned for Jake to sit. The boss began his tone coldly. "For that confusing story with Barbara, I should have fired both of you, but I turned a blind eye and believed your excuse for now." Jake immediately launched into an excuse. "Sir, I'm her boss, and I couldn't forsake her while her spouse is clearly unhinged. There are court hearings coming up, and once that's sorted, everything will calm down. We're not here to speak about your personal turmoil, Jake. I've received some." Jake tightened his stomach, wondering what kind of information the boss had. His gaze immovable. "It looks you've been implicated in fraud, mismanaging the company's advertising budget, funneling money into shell companies, and pocketing the difference." The details are. Jake's mouth felt dry. "That's ludicrous." I never heard the boss raise a hand to silence him and pressed a button on his desk phone. A moment later, the head of security walked in, followed by another man in a crisp suit. "This is a friend of mine," the boss said, gesturing. According to the man in the suit, he currently works in the department that investigates financial and economic crimes. "This investigation will remain unofficial, but we're going to verify everything that's come to light." True, Jake. You are looking at massive fines and possibly a criminal case. Muttered, his confidence crumbling. I don't know where this is coming from. Someone is trying to ruin me, the boss. Jake froze as he tilted his head, scrutinizing him. Do you play poker? The question caught him off surprise. No, not really, just occasionally. For fun. The boss slipped a folder across the desk and opened it, revealing images of Jake seated at a poker table in dark back rooms, surrounded by unsavory persons. Say you sometimes win, and sometimes you lose, huge Jack. E's face became pale as he battled to construct a logical response that's not, this isn't what it seems like, it's simply, I wasn't. The boss's expression remained chilly. Harmless, Jake. You've put this company's name on the line. From this moment forward, you're under scrutiny every step you make. Jake left the workplace under the watchful eye of a security officer, and everything is being observed. Thoughts racing back in his own office, he sank into his chair, grasping his head in anguish. His phone chimed, and he glanced at the screen. A message from David. Merry Christmas, Mr. Confidence. Jake threw the phone onto his desk, his irritation spilling over moments later. It buzzed again, this time a call from Barbara. Jake, she began, her tone agitated with dread. Can we meet for dinner and discuss an action plan? We need to figure out what to do. Jake, his patience at its breaking point, snapped. I'm not going to solve other people's problems. Barbara, figure it out yourself. Why the hell did you even drag me into your mess? Jake, please, Barbara. I have more important things to cope with. Bye. He hung up. Without hesitation, Barbara blocked her number and sat on the edge of her bed, face buried in her hands, tears flowing down her cheeks. The weight of her decisions overwhelmed her. She had lost everything: David, Jake, and even the life she had taken for granted in few days. After Jake's treachery, Barbara received the heartbreaking news that she was being fired by her supervisor, citing the public scandal as the reason, noting that the organization couldn't afford for her turmoil to taint its reputation on the same. When she learned that Jake was being investigated for financial fraud at work, her divorce case was quickly resolved. And ruthlessly, David's overwhelming proof ensured she got nothing. Assets, no financial support, only legal bills for her own counsel. Barbara, desperate, had to take out a loan to cover her debts. In time, she managed to get a new employment, but from her prior work, her compensation was low and her obligations tiresome. Every day, she was reminded of how far she had fallen, and every night, she grieved herself to sleep. Jake, once bursting with confidence and charm, now sat in his modest, unkempt flat. His lawyer had warned him that the fines for his deception were just the beginning of jail time. He gazed at the proof. David had realized the completeness of the investigation. The truth was evident. David had uncovered not. Jake had not only an affair with Barbara, but also bogus shell corporations and embezzlement operations. Jake's dark side is only partially disclosed, and the remainder has already been unearthed by his boss. Anonymous information from David was only the catalyst for the genuine analysis of his wrath towards David. Burned hot, but there was nothing he could do. David had outplayed him, and Jake knew it. David, meanwhile, sat in the tranquil comfort of his parents' ranch, made his heart feel lighter than it had in months. He went back to William, the private detective he'd engaged. The man had been worth every penny, collecting information. Tremendous quantity of evidence, not only against Barbara, but also against Jake. It had been an expensive endeavor, but for David's honor and dignity were priceless, free of the weight of betrayal. Focusing on what actually important, family, and repairing his life, he felt no need to gloat or seek more retribution. He had already won. As he watched the sun set over the horizon, David felt a sense of peace. He was ready to leave the past behind and begin a new life. If you love the narrative, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a pleasant mood and good luck.